Welcome in this video, a video in which I'm proud and happy to announce the upcoming release of my second book, Tsui Hark, The Chaos Theory, so a biography on one of the most influential Hong Kong film director. I have to admit first that for you who speak English, who are not French native, this announcement may be a little bit frustrating because it will be only in French. So why am I doing this video then? It's no use for you. Well, it's not in order to make you frustrated or anything. It's to actually create awareness around this book so that potentially it could be released in your country. Actually, I have kept the rights, the copyrights for the book when it comes to an English publication or a Chinese publication. So if by any chance you work for a publishing house in a place where the main language is Chinese or English, then you can contact me directly in order to see if we can strike a deal so that the book can be released in your territory. If you are from a place which doesn't speak as the main language English or Chinese, you will have to deal with my publisher. The publisher, his name is Omake Books. They have a website. They are very easy to reach, so it's still possible. You can still release this book in your country, but you will need to deal with my publisher instead of me directly. And if you are not working for a publishing house, if you are just a viewer or normal audience who appreciate Tsui Hark's films, who loves Hong Kong cinema, well, there is still the possibility for you to contact a publishing house in your respective country, tell them about the existence of this book, and let them know that you would be interested to buy it in your own language. And then, potentially, maybe, the publishing house will get in touch with me and we may be able to have the book released in some other language than French. That's really what I hope for. That's really the main reason why I do this video. I would be very happy to share my insight on my love for Tsui Hark cinema through this book. So what is in the book anyway? It's a pretty big baby. It's about 570 pages with 16 pages more with pictures. So pictures which for the most part have never been seen to this day, or at least not from the general public because they were in private collections. I was lucky to have the access to some of those private pictures by some of the people I interviewed in the making of this book, and I'm very happy and I'm very thankful for the people who have given me access to this picture. I think they are really nice and they really illustrate well the mood of the time, or the spirit of the time during the golden age of Hong Kong cinema. They are mostly about the 80s and the 90s, which arguably is the most interesting period of Tsui Hark's career and of Hong Kong cinema in general. The book took me about 3 years to be written, and then I did some regular updates because it took a long time for it to be published. Actually, it took 3 years for me to find the right publisher and to have the book finally released. It's going to be released at the end of November, on the 23rd of November. And so during those 3 years of wait, I was able to update it with some of the new films that Tsui Hark did in the meantime during those 3 years, and keep also interviewing people, so I was able to add a few more things to it. So something which took quite a long time, but given the subject, given the material I had to deal with, I think it's almost impossible to do less than that. And I'm proud to say that it's going to be the definitive book about Tsui Hark. And I'm not saying that because I'm full of my work, full of myself. I'm saying that because there have already been some good books about Tsui Hark before me. There have been one book in the US by Lisa Odam-Strokes, if I remember correctly, and there have been two books in English and Chinese, one from the Hong Kong International Film Festival and one from the Hong Kong Film Archive. There is also one book in Chinese, in simplified Chinese from mainland China, but from the information I was able to gather and from a superficial reading, basically it seems like the author was very creative when it comes to Tsui Hark's life, and he used his imagination on a certain amount of things, so I don't think it's a very reliable book. But the three others, they were really good. A few mistakes there and there, but hey, Mine probably has a few mistakes also. But so they were really good, and they were a very good foundation for me to work on. If they had not done their work, I would have needed to go in under the same direction. I would have needed to dig the same questions, but as they already did, I didn't have to do so, and so I was able to dig even further. So that's why I'm saying that this book, my book, is going to be even better. It's because I was able to use those books as foundations. In the meantime, I also used as many sources as I could in order to have the most insight possible. So I used a lot of magazines, be it in France. There actually been a lot of interviews of Tsui Hark and of people who have worked with him in France. So that's material which will be probably new for you who is not reading French, who is not in France. There are also different things from magazines elsewhere in the world, from the US, from the UK. And I was also able to access the magazine, the main cinema magazine from Hong Kong during the time of Tsui Hark, during the golden age of Hong Kong cinema, which is called City Entertainment, Film Bi-Weekly, then renamed City Entertainment. And there are a lot of interesting things in it. There are a lot of articles and interviews with Tsui Hark, which, as far as I know, were never used and were never shown in the Western world. So that bring a lot of interesting information regarding Tsui Hark on his work. For example, I think the very first interview made by Tsui Hark was for City Entertainment. That was when he was in the middle of the production of Butterfly Murders. So really interesting interview. And at the same time, I also did a lot of interviews personally. So during the course of those 3 years, but even earlier than that, I had actually done some other interviews before that I started working on the book. The main interview, of course, was with Tsui Hark himself. He was kind enough to free some of his time, and that's not easy for a director like him who is so busy. And so I was able to have roughly around 10 hours of interviews with him. I was also able to interview Nansen Chi, his ex-wife and his main collaborator for many, many years. But I got many others. Actually, I have more than 100 people who have been interviewed for this book, and some of them are pretty famous. I got John Woo, a specific interview with John Woo dealing really with his relationship with Tsui Hark, so that was very interesting. I got Ringo Lam, I got Johnny To. I got some people who are also quite famous, but who, as far as I know, never really talked deeply about their relationship with Tsui Hark. And I'm thinking here about Sally Ye, who was kind of the main film workshop girl during the 80s. She was in Shanghai Blues, Peking Opera Blues, The Killer, I Love Maria. So a big singer, a big star in Hong Kong here. It took me a very long time to have this interview, several years actually. But at the end, she was kind enough to give a bit of her time to discuss her relationship with Tsui Hark back then. So that was very interesting. And I also got quite a few people who, as far as I know, were never interviewed to talk about their collaboration with Tsui Hark. So I got, for example, Sito Chokon. Sito Chokon was the scriptwriters on films like We Are Going to Eat You, Dangerous Encounter, First Kind, Zoo Warrior of the Magic Mountain. So someone who worked on some very interesting films. Raymond Lee, who was the official director of New Dragon Gate Inn, and who also worked behind the scene on some other production for Tsui Hark, and who is somebody who is often described as just a yes man. I don't think he's a yes man. I think he was able to bring some of his own ideas into the film. So I'm very happy that he can get some kind of recognition about the work he has done with Tsui Hark. I also got people like James Leung. James Leung was artistic director on many films of Tsui Hark during the 80s, and who bring a different perspective thanks to working in the art direction. I mean, that's not the kind of people we often hear about when we are talking about Hong Kong cinema. And for somebody like Tsui Hark, who is very visual, who is very good at designing things, characters. I think it's a very interesting addition to the book. I also got somebody like OK Ping. OK Ping, she was the scriptwriter of New Dragon Gate Inn, and then the remake he did much later in mainland China, and who was not credited for the first film because of her political orientation. So that was very interesting to be able to talk with her and to see what she brings, what she did, how she worked with Tsui Hark. Very interesting. I also got Andima, who was in charge of Cinefex, the special effects studio linked to a film workshop. So another perspective again. So I really tried to gather a lot of different perspectives. It's not just Tsui Hark's point of view of things. Of course, I've put it in there because it's very important to have. And yeah, it's been very candid, very honest in the interview we did. So I think that brings once again another perspective on how Tsui Hark look at his work and look at his career. For a long time, he was not such a powerful director and somebody very confident about himself, which is the image he tends to project. And actually, you will see in the book that he was somebody who doubted many times, even sometimes where, in my opinion, there was really no reason to doubt about him, but still, he still did, which makes him a very human person, which of course he is, but that's something which I'm glad to be able to highlight more maybe in my book, or at least I hope that's what will appear when you will read it. So many interesting person to be able to talk with. I also covered really all the films in which Tsui Hark has been involved, and that includes some films which he has never officially been revealed to be involved, so that's an interesting thing to talk about as well. I also talk about his career as an actor. That's not necessarily something which is often talked about when we discuss about Tsui Hark. He's not very proud of it actually, but I think the reality is a bit more ambiguous. I think his perspective on the reality is there is a gap in between. But anyway, that's my own theory there, but that's another interesting thing to discuss about. And I also have a full chapter about all the projects that Tsui Hark never was able to bear to fruition. So that's a pretty big chapter actually, because as you know, Tsui Hark is very creative, he's full of ideas, so he threw a lot of concept all over the years. So I really tried very hard to gather all of them, which is not necessarily easy, because sometimes somebody would tell you about one project and somebody else would tell you about another project, but they would describe it differently, but then you realize, oh, it was probably the same one. So it was not easy, especially also because almost everybody in the Hong Kong film industry has a Tsui Hark story. So, for example, I did not a long time ago, a few months ago, an interview with scriptwriter James Yun, who was the main scriptwriter for the UFO, the United Filmmaker Organization. And he was at some point involved with Tsui Hark, and Tsui Hark talked about a project that he had which ended up never being made. But so that was an interesting story to know what was this project about. So some of those films, it will be just like 2 or 3 lines, just a concept, and it never went further than that. And for some others, they were in production and they were stopped later at different moments of the production for different reasons. And so on those films, I was able to develop a bit more. And of course, that's in this chapter that you will hear about his mythical Monkey King project, which was never really fully achieved. You can say that his collaboration with Stephen Chow deal a bit with some of the elements that he had developed for this project, but it's not really that. So it's really interesting to be able to talk about this. That's some of the subjects which really motivated me to do this book. And I also touch through all the process on some of those subjects which sometimes have led to many questions, like for example the involvement of King Hu on Swordsman, on how he was removed from the project. That's these kind of things which have been something many Hong Kong film fans have talked about, and so I've tried to dig deeper on some of those issues. So I really hope that it's a book which will satisfy the Hong Kong film fans, the Tsui Hark fans, and which can be almost the definitive version on Tsui Hark's career. And I hope that you will be able to access to this book in your own language. So once again, if you work in the publishing industry wherever in the world, if you are interested in the book and you want to see it published in your own native language, don't hesitate to put pressure on the publishing house in your country, and don't hesitate to contact me directly in order to see if we can manage to have the book published. And in any case, if you are a part of the media wherever it is, well, mostly something which can be discussed in English, because I don't really speak other languages, but if you are a YouTuber, if you work for the press, if you work for radio, whatever, TV, and you want to talk about the book, or if you want to talk about Tsui Hark in general, don't hesitate to contact me as well.